Rabbi Azoi. 6 Arei Miklat were set up to provide protection for someone who killed accidentally b'shoigeg. And the Gemara says there were signs on the road pointing a person towards those Arei Miklats. But in contrast, there were no signs pointing people towards Yerushalayim, despite the fact that many people were oile l'regel. And that seems strange. Seemingly, very few people would have killed b'shoigeg, and yet there were directions how to get to the Miklats. But for the tens of thousands of people who were oile l'regel, there was no indications which way to go. My hi. That's not my question. That was the question of Rav Aharon Kotler, who was born in 1892 in a town called Sislovitz in the Grodno province of Belarus. His family traced their lineage all the way back to Rashi. As a young child, he was an outstanding genius. The people of the town used to come and marvel at how little Arka, as he was called, would recite all of Tanakh by heart. But his childhood was not easy. His mother died when he was only 4, his father died when he was 11. His sister Malka, who was a brilliant mathematician, was ensnared by the Enlightenment, and she spent much of her life, and Rav Aharon Kotler's life, trying to persuade him to join her in her enlightened, secular ways. The young orphan traveled to various places to learn, including to Minsk, where at the tender age of 14, he wrote a kuntras about Maseches Mikvahos, which apparently dazzled the Torah world. But wary of the ideological influences which he could be subject to in Minsk, Rav Reuven Grozovsky took him off to learn under the Alter Slobodka. He arrived in Slobodka with his friend Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. It didn't take him long to be noticed. He would often ask penetrating questions during the shir of the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Moshe Mordechai Epstein. It's just that he was so short, he would have to stand on a chair to make himself heard. One Bein Hazmanim, Rav Aharon had the opportunity to speak and learning with no less than Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the Ohr Somayach. He was so taken by this young prodigy that he told Rav Aaron's Rebbes, "Take care of this young boy. He has the potential to emerge as the Rabbi Akiva Eiger of our generation." Prophetic words. Age 22, he married Chana Pearl, the daughter of Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer, who was a Rosh Yeshiva in Slutsk. Rav Aharon joined the teaching faculty there, but in 1921, due to the Bolshevik Revolution, the yeshiva had to split, and he became the Rosh Yeshiva, the youngest Rosh Yeshiva in Europe at the age of 29, in the part of the yeshiva which moved to Kletsk over the border in Poland. It became, of course, a very high caliber yeshiva, including some familiar names. There was a Maggid Shir there by the name of Rav Shach, and one of the Bochrim was no less than the great Rav Aaron Leib Steinman. But like so many yeshivas, once World War II hit, it had to go from exile to exile. By 1941, Rav Aharon saw that the American Vada Hatzalah, which was intended to save Yidden in Europe, was fragmented and ineffective. So reluctantly, he took advantage of a visa he'd been granted to travel to America, to try, which he did, with tireless effort to try to save European Yidden from the impending massacres. Back now to Rav Aaron's kasha about the contrast between the signs on the roads leading towards the Arei Miklat and the fact there were no signs leading towards Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash. Why the difference? Rav Aharon answers that if a person killed b'shoigeg, the Torah wanted to give him as low a profile as possible. Because imagine if there were no road signs and he was walking looking for the Miklat. He would have asked fellow travelers, "How do I get to the Miklat?" They would have answered him, "You have to take this way and that way, but what happened? Why are you going to the Miklat?" And he would have responded, "Well, I killed, albeit b'shoigeg." That conversation would have normalized the idea of bloodletting, of murder, albeit it was only accidental. The Torah wouldn't have wanted to normalize such a thing, and therefore the road signs were in place. He wouldn't have to ask anyone anything, and the low profile was achieved. Masei came going to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, alil regel. The Torah wanted to give that as high a profile as possible. So if a person was going to Yerushalayim but couldn't find his way, he'd ask a fellow traveler, "How do I get to Yerushalayim?" And he might be asked, "Why are you going to Yerushalayim?" And he'd tell them, alil regel. Wow, alil regel? That's a great idea. I want to join in too. That whole process of making a conversation, making a fuss, would make the Ruchni's experience alive and exciting. And therefore there were no road signs to try to encourage activity, discussion, and life around Ruchnius. What a fitting message for Rav Aharon Kotler to convey. His own life was dedicated to making Yiddishkeit, Torah and Ruchnius alive and vibrant. His Torah building, when he joined the fledgling Lakewood project in 1943, there were only 14 Talmidim. There have been hundreds and thousands of people who have learned in Beis Medrash Gavoa in Lakewood since then, and their effect on Torah Yiddishkeit has literally been worldwide. His non-stop activism and sense of achrayus to other Yidden, both during the war and afterwards, was simply remarkable. The Vad Hatzalah in the war, Agudas Yisrael, the Metzes Gedolei Torah, Torah Masei, Hinuch Atzmai in Eretz Yisrael, you name it, Rav Aharon was behind it. Lobbying, fundraising, working tirelessly and fearlessly. As Rabbi Chaim had said about him way back in 1940, the next generation will rest on his shoulders. Rav Aharon's intensity, the reality, the priority of Ruchnius was most seen in the Beis Medrash. Aside from his awesome hasmada, speed, and unbelievable ge'oinus, his shir was a lesson in passion in Torah. As one young man who heard a shir from him in Brooklyn in the late 1950s remarked, "I saw an older man with a passion I'd never seen before or since. His face was beet red with excitement and exertion. His flaming blue eyes bore into the souls of all present. The energy he exuded, the pathos of his speech, and the glow of his face made it a surreal experience. Despite not having understood, that image is engraved in my mind for eternity." Others recount that he would argue his point in the sugya so strongly, woe to all those who opposed him. He would rip those people to shreds, and he wouldn't stop. In scenes reminiscent of Amoraim in the Gemara, he would apparently have people thrown out of the Beis Medrash if they carried on objecting to his pshat in the sugya. Kulo Torah, the Kulo Emes. Like his own lesson about the excitement generated by there being no signs to Yerushalayim, he too lived a life of excitement and encouragement for Torah, for Yidden, and for Yiddishkeit. How much the Torah world owes him. Good Shabbos.